Had a great time talking with my guest for this episode, a musician named Nina DiGregorio. Nina is a classically trained electric violinist. What exactly does that mean? Well, it means she applies her classical training to some of the most iconic rock songs of all time and plays the violin probably like you've never heard it played before. It's actually unbelievable what she does. She takes some of the biggest guitar solos and some of the most beloved rock songs of all time and performs them on the electric violin, and she makes them sound just like the original guitar solos. She's amazed and been praised by some of the original artists who have heard her violin solos. This is all an outgrowth of her band, the Femmes of Rock, which puts on epic live shows with multiple violinists playing these awesome rock songs. But when the pandemic shut down the world a few years ago and they couldn't play live, Nina began posting short videos of herself performing legendary guitar solos on the violin onto social media, and things just took off from there. Nina has had quite a career, having played with all manner of artists who've come through Las Vegas, where she's based. Everybody from Wayne Newton to Toni Braxton to Beyonce to Shakira to The Killers and many more. She was also recently inducted into the Niagara Falls Music Hall of Fame. We talked about all of that and much more, including why rock music is nowhere to be seen on the Spotify's 2023 Wrapped, which summarizes the biggest music of the year. She's also a big Buffalo Bills fan, so we touched on life as a Bills fan and that the Bills need to invite her out to Highmark Stadium to play the national anthem before a game. She does a version of the Star Spangled Banner, just like the one Jimi Hendrix made famous at Woodstock in the 1960s. It's awesome. It makes sense. She should be there doing it before a game. Quick reminder, give this episode a like or a comment so I can keep bringing you interviews with interesting people like Nina. So with all that said, here she is, straight from Las Vegas, Nina DiGregorio. So let's get going. It's great to have you here. Great to meet you. Been watching you so much on Twitter is mainly where I initially saw you, and what you're doing is so cool and so wild, and I don't think I ever saw anyone playing an electric violin before, or if I did, no one was playing it like you play it, so maybe it didn't catch my attention.
There's a few of us out there, but we're definitely not as common as guitar players.
Yeah, and I should say too, you're fresh off of induction into the Niagara Falls Music Hall of Fame, so congratulations. That has to feel good, right?
Thank you. Yes, it was really nice to be honored by my hometown. I'm from Lewiston, New York, which is like 7 minutes north of Niagara Falls,
Okay.
but it's so small that nobody's ever heard of it. So basically, Niagara Falls, Buffalo area.
So tell me about that night. How was it? I mean, I watched your speech online. That was great. But how was that whole experience for you?
It was great. It was a little bit off the cuff. I mean, there were musicians that I had heard about when I lived in the area as being other great local musicians that I never actually met until that night of the induction. So it was wonderful to see them perform as well and to meet so many people that I had only heard about. I left when I was right out of school, so I never really had a chance to be a pro musician in that area. My whole career has been out west. So it was really fun. And then, I was going to perform to backing tracks. And at the last minute, I just called up a band from the audience and we just kind of winged it. But it was a lot of fun and the audience liked it. So,
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't see the performance, but I saw that you were kind of just recruiting people.
yeah.
And so that all worked out, huh?
Yeah. Luckily, they didn't take my award back after I hijacked their ceremony for a little while.
And what did you play? It sounded like you were going to play Kashmir. Is that what
We
you ended
did.
up playing?
We played Kashmir, and I think only one of the people had actually performed it before. So we were kind of shouting out sections of the song, and not the easiest. There's some time signature changes and turnarounds going on to just kind of wing, but
Yeah.
kind of like a jam session, and it was fun.
Yeah, and you guys pulled it off. I guess the audience must have really dug that too. Just by virtue of the fact that you're doing it for the first time and only time right there for them.
I think in that moment, it was more important to the evening to have something off the cuff that the audience would get up out of their feet and be cheering for and just be like, oh, this is totally spontaneous, than have a perfectly polished performance of me with my backing track. So it was a last minute decision, but I think that everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's fun. So let's talk about, sort of why they were inducting you. And I think that has a lot to do with your band, Femmes of Rock. Although other things too, you've got a really amazing career, which we'll talk about as we go on here. But talk about Femmes of Rock, where did the idea come from? How did you put that band together? Um, how'd that all come about?
Well, the beginnings of it, I would say, started when I was 12 or 13 years old in middle school because I played in the orchestra. I played violin. My friends played in the orchestra. We had a string quartet that would do classical performances and we'd play in weddings and things like that when we were kids.
Wow.
And I wanted to play my favorite music in the medium that I was familiar with. And the medium I was familiar with was strings. So I would take my favorite music that I listened to all the time, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Chicago, the Beatles, things like that. And I would write string quartet arrangements of this music for my group back then. And fast forward, 10, 12 years after that, and I was becoming a professional musician and I got affiliated with Yamaha and I was able to get the electric instruments. I'd moved to Las Vegas to work professionally and put together a corporate group, and we mostly did private events on the Strip. And then one day someone asked if we could come to their theater and do a headlining show, and I said yes. And then I had to turn around and write the show. So that's pretty much how it started, and it's just gone from there.
And so two things to just follow up on there. You wrote that show, and what did you do? Were you doing like rock songs like similar to what you're doing now? Is that kind of what you put
Yes,
together?
basically, I took like kind of what I'd been doing since I was a preteen, which was writing these classic rock arrangements for quartet, and I elaborated on them and I turned them into something that people could sit down and sit through and be entertained by for 90 minutes. So a lot of them are now medleys. They're like, maybe 8 to 10 minute long medleys where we do bam, bam, bam. We'll do like a Who medley or an AC/DC medley where it's, snippets of each song where you go from like the verse to the chorus to the solos and bam, 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 right into something else. We also incorporated singing into the show. So we do kind of gang style vocals on a lot of the choruses in these songs. None of us are singers. We're all string players, but we didn't want to hire a lead singer for our show because as soon as you do that, it's
Yeah.
not your show anymore. It's the lead singer's show, the lead singer's branding, and you're just again in the background playing strings, which is the whole reason why we didn't want to do that. We wanted the strings to be out front fronting the show, not behind a singer or a vocalist.
Right.
So we sing ourselves. We don't sing everything. It's a combination of instrumentals and vocals. But that's kind of the idea. We also put a video experience that syncs with the music exactly during the show. And, I talk to the audience and front it. And sometimes it's like bad stand-up comedy, but, it's honest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And then so the other thing I wanted to ask you about is the violin. You said you got hooked up with Yamaha. Are they like the sole makers of electric violin? Or
no, there's a lot of companies that
yeah,
make electric violins. Yamaha may be the largest.
yeah.
They are a large producer of electric violins. They've had, a few different models that I've owned over the years. And all of the violins that I play that look more like violins that are fretless, those are all Yamahas. And then the ones that look like flying V's that have the frets on them, those are Mark Wood Viper violins.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, for some reason I just never really saw an electric violin. I can't believe that either. I don't know how they eluded me.
They've
Uh,
been around a long time. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of Jean-Luc Ponty and well, even Mark Wood. He was the original violinist in Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and
is,
he kind of invented that instrument.
is,
So,
is that right?
yeah.
So obviously I know Trans-Siberian Orchestra mainly through their Christmas music. I love their Christmas music.
Right.
But I didn't know that he basically invented he plugged one in or something, or he made
Well,
one.
he didn't invent the whole concept of an electric violin, but he did invent the flying V with the frets, that style of electric violin that really kind of opens the door to a lot of new possibilities. The whole reason I got one of those instruments was to be able to play Eddie Van Halen on a violin.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to do it when I first bought the instrument. It took a lot of messing with techniques and effects chains and pedals to be able to kind of duplicate his style and sounds on a violin. It's
Yeah.
not as easy as just learning the notes.
Right. And so what is it about those flying V violins that make it easier to play, I guess, rock music? Or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, certain things. It's like I'm sure a guitar player, when you go to see any sort of rock concert, they have a rack of like 7 or 8
Yeah.
guitars they bring, and they have a guitar tech. Like, I'm not lucky enough to have a violin tech. Like, probably three of us on earth that know how to tune these instruments. But basically, they require various different guitars to achieve different sounds in different songs.
Okay.
And the same can be said of a violin. So what I use the fretted violins for, a lot of people think, oh, it's cheating to use a fretted violin. That's not the case. It's way harder to play a fretted violin. I find it easier to do certain guitar techniques like pinch harmonics with the fretted violin. And also it's impossible to do tapping on a finger tapping on a violin without the frets. That was like the main reason I went out on a limb and bought it, was to see if I could figure out how to do that. And I wasn't even sure when I bought the violin that it could be done, but it's possible.
So that's interesting and really fascinating that it goes all the way back to when you were a teenager or 13-year-old. How young did you start playing, or when you started taking? How old were you when you started taking lessons and learning the instrument?
I started classical piano at age 6 and took lessons for a few years before the school had us choose an instrument to play at 9 years old. And I wanted to play the saxophone, but they said I was too small and I couldn't carry it to the bus. So they gave me a violin, and that's 9 years old, school orchestra. That's when I started violin.
And so what did you think of it at that point? Did you want it, or did you want to play your saxophone?
No, I was just happy to play anything. I mean, I think that I was pretty into music, and I had been climbing up onto the piano since I was about 2 years old to kind of plunk out tunes and things like that. And so I was happy to play an instrument. Maybe someday I'll get a saxophone.
Yeah.
Saxophone cover.
You talked in your Hall of Fame induction speech about your parents driving you to rehearsals or practice. Talk a little bit about that. Were they musical people? Did they sort of influence you in any way in this, or?
No, I'm the first musician in my family. My parents, like my mom took some piano lessons as a child, but not, to the level of being competitive or performing or anything like that. And my father had a guitar in the house and some fake books, and he sometimes when my mom would make dinner when I was a kid, he'd strum the chords to a Beatles song and I'd play the vocal line on my violin, and we'd do that for like an hour while my mom cooked dinner. And it was kind of like the early version of what I do in my show now, was just picking out those melodies to the Beatles songs and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of what you do right now. I think that's one of the cool things that you do, is you do the vocal melodies on the violin. And we'll take a look at it. I want to show, because I think it's one of the coolest things you do, is that Zeppelin Immigrant song where you're playing the bass, the guitar, and then doing the vocals.
Yeah, that song just translates so well to any version that you put it in. It's like the quintessential rock song. But when I went to record it, I was like, oh, this bass part's a little harder than I thought it would be. It took me a minute to get the run, the bass run up to tempo.
Yeah. So when you do a song like that and you're playing all three instruments, how do you record that? What do you record first? Like the guitar section, the bass? How do you do that?
So the usual hierarchy in Logic, I open up a Logic session. The first thing you do is you get a click track in there so that you can line everything else up. Then usually you want to lay down the drums and bass first. So I suppose if I like really sat down to try and learn a drum part, I could. I mean, I've plunked a few things out here or there, but it takes me much longer. So, Brody will play drums, or else sometimes we'll program the drums for the track. And then I'll go in and I'll put the bass part in, and then I'll usually record guitars. And if there's anything else like keyboards or anything, in the violin, I usually do last. And so then, obviously you're recording and you're filming, and then you want to take the recording that you do and mix it professionally and then add it to the video. So you use like Final Cut Pro to put everything together.
Wow. And
so even a 30-second long video, it's not as easy as people think. Because if you want it to sound good, like, sure, I could put my cell phone up there and record the audio through a cell phone, but it's going to sound like garbage. And I kind of like to think that these videos I put out on social media are like mini concerts that are professionally mixed. I don't want to put out bad quality audio with things that I produce.
Yeah, I think it really that comes across. It feels that way. I mean, it sounds like studio recording, um, and that's quite a process. So, and we could take a look at it. I think the immigrant song one is, I don't know, something like 40 seconds, maybe 50
Yeah,
seconds, I
not
want to
too
say.
long, but it still took a while because I had to
Yeah,
learn all the instrument parts and then I had to,
yeah,
record all the instrument parts and then put them all together. So
yeah. So that's what I wanted to say. Like, how long does the full, how long does it take you to get that 53-second clip or whatever it was?
it really depends on the solo that I'm recording or the piece that I'm recording. It varies, I think some of them I can manage to do in a day, and a lot of them will take 3 to 5 days, and some of them will take weeks or months. Right
Wow.
now, I'm working on something by Eddie Van Halen that I've been working on for probably 6 months, torturing my family with. So,
What is it? Can you tell us
no,
what
I
it
can't
is?
tell you yet,
No?
but it's pretty difficult, and you'll see it in a few months.
All right. I'm looking forward to that. And then tell me about the creative process behind this whole thing. Like when you decide you want to do a song, where do you begin? What do how do you figure out the music? How does it, how's that all work?
So I started this during COVID because my touring show was not allowed to tour. So basically, what I did was I took the solos that we would perform in our show and I started putting out the social media videos just to kind of try and keep the momentum up because, COVID killed all that. We had to start from square one with touring and venues again at that point. And,
Wow.
you know, so I started out just recording solos that we do live in our show. And then they got so much viewership and interest that I started thinking of other things that I love that I wanted to learn that I didn't already know. So after I had exhausted the solos that we do in our show, I started thinking of other things that I would really like to learn or that would sound cool doing it in this style and pick it and learn. And like I said, some of the things I've chosen are challenging and take me quite a long time to figure out how to translate sounds and styles to the violin because, some people will do covers, violin covers of songs, and they sound like a violin and they're great
Yeah.
players, virtuoso players sound fantastic, but they sound like a violin. My thing is that I don't want to sound like a violin trying to play a guitar part. I want to actually sound like the guitar player that did it. So it's a lot of time researching sounds and trying to create sounds. And then when I get it as far as I can, Brody will help with the final recording, like tweaking the sounds and doing the master mix and everything like that. I am a little behind the game with my recording skills, but I've come a long way in 2 years. So
Yeah.
not at the level he has for decades of experience. So
Yeah. And I think you do capture that. It really does sound like a guitar. And even I guess you have to really figure out the effects to use. I know in some of your videos, you'll have like a little like inlaid video showing your feet like working the pedals and whatnot. So you need to know, like, I guess, is that a wah pedal? Is that the right
yeah,
term?
it depends. Sometimes I'll show if there's wah or if there's whammy in the video. I'll make sure to capture that in the video so that people understand how I created the sound. Because otherwise, you get people who are like, that's not a violin. You're just miming to the
Is
original
that
song.
right? People
Oh, yeah.
actually think that?
All the
Yeah.
time, people will say that. So it's
That's crazy.
even when the original artist comments on the video and says they like it, people will still accuse me of miming to solo. So. But
Well,
and it's
that
funny because I spent my whole career as a live performer, never heard someone say that my whole life. And then when COVID hit and I had to start making videos, now all of a sudden you get all these skeptics that don't think you're actually
yeah.
doing it. So
Well, a lot of people suddenly had a lot more time on their hands,
yeah.
and everyone became, I guess, an armchair critic and whatnot. Um, but so I mean, that's wild. So great stuff. Let's take a look at the Led Zeppelin "Immigrant Song." Right before we do, though, so you said this song really translates well. I guess to playing the violin. Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of Led Zeppelin's music works really well. It's so interesting instrumentally that I think it works well in the context of what I do and what my show does.
Yeah. And anything particular about this song, just from, like a fan perspective? Is this
I
kind
think
of
that
one?
I think Robert Plant's vocal range works really well with the range of the violin. Sometimes when you try and take certain people's vocals and put them on the violin in the same octave or in the same range, they're kind of buried or muddled a little bit. But his vocals, they cut through in their music and they cut through in my music. And I think that the violin and his particular timbre of voice work well when replaced one or the other.
Interesting. And is that something that you heard like as you listened to violin, or I mean, as you listened to Led Zeppelin, even as like a kid? Were you like picking up on that, or
The
is that
thing
some?
that I've been thinking about since I started arranging music for strings, which was, like I said, around middle school time. But sometimes you have your favorite song in the world and you're like, that's not going to sound good on strings. It's just not going to translate well to the medium that we're using it with. And then sometimes you'll hear something and you'll be like, yep, that's going to work. That's going to be good. So we do a whole like 10-minute long Led Zeppelin medley in our show. And I
Oh,
think
wow.
that music works pretty well with strings.
Interesting. All right, so let's take a look. Here is Nina DiGregorio doing Immigrant Song, playing all three instruments here. So that was really cool, Nina. And you said you do a medley of about 10 Zeppelin songs. What are some of the other Led Zeppelin songs that Femmes of Rock does in their shows?
We do a bit of the Rain song,
Mm,
which obviously has, the John Paul Jones stuff going on that
yeah.
works really well with the live strings. We also will do Kashmir, we'll do the Immigrant Song, we do Heartbreaker, we do Whole Lot of Love,
Wow.
and we bring Brody in on vocals when he's with us. Sometimes he texts the show for us, and sometimes he has his own shows, so he's not there. But when he is there, we'll bring him in and feature him on the Robert Plant vocals during that medley because he's like a dead ringer for his vocals. He has a Zeppelin show of his own that he
Oh
tours. So
yeah.
it's a fun moment, and people always get a kick out of that. I'll pretend like, oh, our sound guy's never sung in front of people before, and he wants to get up and sing a song. Give him a little encouragement. And he gets up there and he's just like perfect. So
And I don't know if we mentioned it, but Brody is your husband.
yes.
So he's a musician too, obviously, and he does like a Led Zeppelin. What does he do? Like a cover band type of thing?
Yeah, he has a band called Zusa, Zeppelin USA. They're a Zeppelin cover band. He has a Queen show. He has a British rock show that combines a bunch of stuff. He also
Wow.
does like a symphonic rock show that has a symphony orchestra behind him doing a bunch of different rock stuff. And that's actually one of the projects we worked on long before we were ever married was he had hired me to help write the symphony charts for that show. And so we knew each other for a long time in a work context, and I still perform on that show and help write new charts when he needs them.
Wow, that's interesting. So let's talk about some of the other songs that you've done that I've seen that are great. You mentioned Pink Floyd, so you obviously a big fan. I've seen you do "Comfortably Numb," which you've done. I've seen you post it on Twitter. I've also seen the band does it as well, and that's pretty epic when you guys do it live. And I think that you're on there. The version I saw on YouTube, it was hard to tell because the lighting, it was kind of dark, and I couldn't tell if it was you or not.
I think it was me. My hair was
Yeah,
blonder, I think, at the time. It was like quite blonde in that video, but we did like a synced laser
yeah.
show because it was live in Las Vegas, that video. Whenever
Okay.
we do shows in our hometown, we can add all those extra goodies like lasers and fog and haze, and
Yeah,
we even had video mapping in that show. So it's always fun to play our hometown where all of our gear lives.
yeah. That was great. And yeah, you guys had like the purple lights, the lasers, the smoke, everything. Was
Yeah,
that?
yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I always get to duel with our guitar player at the
Yeah.
end. So I'll start playing the solo and then I'll call the guitar player up and he'll play for a while and then we'll kind of go back and forth. And usually it's a moment that everybody in the audience really likes during the show.
Yeah, I could see that they were digging it. And you get a great you have multiple cameras shooting that thing too, so it really comes out looking good.
That particular show, we hired a camera crew to come in and film the show so that we could put together the music video.
Yeah, that came out great. So let's take a look first. Let's take a look at you doing the guitar solo from Comfortably Numb, and then I'll show just a short clip of that too. Maybe I'll show the part where you're dueling, which is
Okay.
cool. Here, so here it is. That was really cool, Nina.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what about Pink Floyd? Pink Floyd really translates well to the violin too. It sounds like.
Oh, for sure. I can't think of anything that is an easier sell than putting David Gilmour's solos on a fretless violin. I mean, it's just,
Yeah,
they're elastic and they're gooey and they're emotional and they're melodic and it works really well for a violin.
yeah. Now, is that is a David Gilmour solo easier to play than let's say an Eddie Van Halen solo, or even like a Jimmy Page, perhaps? Like, it seems like Gilmour played like a little bit of a. Yeah, I'm not a musician, so I may not be using the right terminology, but a lower tempo or more mid tempo type of.
I always say that different guitar players are difficult for different reasons. So, are the notes easier to learn than an Eddie Van Halen solo? Yes. But is the same emotion that he played with as easy to capture? It's not easy to capture that. A lot of times when you see people playing David Gilmour, it sometimes will even turn you off because they're showboating too much in the solo, and it's like almost disrespectful to the solo a little bit. Like, I don't want to hear you shredding like over a,
Yeah,
comfortably numb. Really, it's like you try and keep remnants. If you're going to go off and do your own thing, keep remnants of the original solo in there because it's so iconic, kind of.
yeah.
But I think that trying to let the music be the star of the show with his solos and not showboating things is the key to covering his solos.
Yeah. So you're saying he's kind of got some subtleties that it's important to not overplay, right?
Yeah, I think not overplaying and also being able to lay back on your tempos, because if you're pushing it a little bit, even if you don't, like an audience that doesn't understand music, they don't understand. If you're not really sitting in the pocket on those solos, they may not understand why, but it's going to feel a little uncomfortable when you're listening to it. And the reason is because it's pushing a little bit. It's not laying back in the pocket of the song. And so those subtleties with timing and also the subtleties with the musicality and really respecting the music, I think, is the difficult thing about covering his solos.
And it's great that you pay such close attention to that. I also wonder too, I've watched so many of your videos. You really seem to get into it. you seem to like be getting into it emotionally when you're playing them. Is that true? Are you really feeling it?
Yeah, and I think that probably comes from spending so much time as a live performer prior to doing these video recordings. Um, I'm on stage playing to an audience my whole life. So I think a lot of that translates to when I make these videos at home. But at the same time, I think that if you're just, it's like it's a hybrid between studio work and live performance. When I've been hired to be playing studio work for other artists, you go in there and you're not being videoed most of the time. So you're going to stand with your best posture that's going to give you the best chance of playing everything perfectly the first time through. And, your face might be pretty serious when you're playing it. And now take live performance. Now, you don't have to have every single note totally perfect the way it would be in a studio, because the moment goes by, it's not recorded into history forever where people are going to hear it again and again and again and again. It happens, and it's gone. What people are going to remember is, yes, you have to play well, but your performance as well. So it requires a little bit more of like looking like you're into the music when you're playing on a stage. You have to play to the audience a bit to make it look like a show.
Yeah.
So I think these videos that I do at home, they kind of are a combination of both things. On one hand, you want to look like you're performing, but on the other hand, you need all the notes to be right, because it is going to live into perpetuity. And if it's wrong, people will hear it again and again and again. And whereas, like I said, a live show, it goes by and people don't even remember. They just remember that you looked awesome when you did it. So
yeah. That's interesting. Okay, so you've got, it looks like a Jimi Hendrix t-shirt on. And by the way, I love your t-shirts that you always wear in these things. So let's look at you doing, I guess maybe one of Jimi Hendrix's most famous songs, probably popularly, and that is Purple Haze. So here it is real quick, and then let's talk about it after. Here's Nina doing Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix. When I listen to Hendrix, I would not think initially like, oh, like that would translate well to a violin, but you make it happen. So what about that? Is it a similar thing that you found like with Zeppelin or with David Gilmour?
Hendrix was one of actually the first guitar player that I attempted. The very first solo I ever attempted to cover was the Star Spangled Banner Jimi Hendrix style. My dad had a record like a DVD or something when I was a kid of this Woodstock documentary, and it had like all the performers, and I remember seeing Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner, and like I want to do that. That's what I want to do right there. This is the coolest guy I've ever seen in my life. I need to learn how to do that. And so, like I said, my dad, he had a guitar and a Marshall amp, and he just knew some chords and for fun, and I had a cheap electric violin from eBay that I had gotten. And so I remember like after school, I came home one day and plugged it into the amp, and I'm like, messing around, putting it up to it, getting feedback like from the violin to the amplifier, and messing with the settings and the gain. And then, trying to get it to achieve some of the sounds that Hendrix did. And I remember my parents, they came home from work, and I was like, look what I can do. And I played the Star Spangled Banner in the style of Jimi Hendrix. And that was, I think, my very first cover attempt, But I think that those early days of trying to he didn't play with a lot of pedals. He was making those sounds with like very primitive effects. The
Yeah.
things he did were so creative because of his limited, we have access to everything now, but he had very limited access to different things at that time. And I think that a lot of that I just did with an amplifier, kind of like he did. And obviously, like, you have to add a wah into the mix to really sound like him on some of the stuff. But I think that capturing that rawness of his sound prior to the digital age of things, I think is important. And the swagger, like Hendrix just had this swagger about him,
Yeah. So that's really interesting. I was wondering, I wanted to touch on that with you. Excuse me, about whether you'd ever done that song. Have you put it out there? Because I haven't seen it if you have.
Oh, the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
We used to open every one of our Femmes of Rock shows with me doing it Hendrix style with our drummer. So just like at Woodstock, we did that for years. And then I wrote some new arrangements, and now we open the show a slightly different way. But so we've done that live for years. And I think there's an old recording of me on YouTube doing it. But it's not recorded professionally through Logic the way that I do now. Like, I just had a cell phone and a Marshall amp. So it sounds, it's not the best sounding thing because it's from a cell phone.
Yeah.
But there is a video of me out there doing that.
That's great. So I'm going to check that out. I've noticed also you seem to be a very big Buffalo Bills fan. Uh,
It's true.
so I was wondering, like, are the Bills aware of you, and why haven't they reached out and said, come play the national anthem before a Bills game, or have they?
So some of my videos have been shared in the Bills Mafia Facebook page, and they've gone viral. Like, a lot of thousands of people like them and watch them. And a lot of people will say that, like, oh, you got to come play at Highmark Stadium. And the funny thing is, I played at two football stadiums. I played at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas here, and I've played at the Falcons Stadium in Atlanta. I've never played at the home stadium of my hometown and my favorite team. So maybe someday. I moved away. My whole career has been on the West Coast. I wasn't a pro musician, so I don't really know anyone in Buffalo. As funny as that sounds, because I was never a pro there. I was just a kid.
Yeah.
So I'm hopefully someday I'll get to play at I was hoping like this year at the Super Bowl, which is in Vegas, would be perfect, but it's not looking like we're gonna be there this year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you never know.
You never know. Crazier things have happened. So
yeah. By the way, I'm an Eagles fan, a huge Eagles fan. So what a game the week before last. I guess it was about 9 days ago or so at this point. But sorry about that one.
It was a great game, but unfortunate situation. It was I felt like it was one of Josh Allen's best performances, and there was a couple key things that ruined that game for us, but it was a shoulda win game.
Yeah. I thought it looked over. As an Eagles fan, we were, my son and I were watching, and we were very worried. And then all of a sudden things changed. That field goal kick, 59 yards in the rain. That was nuts.
To snap it to Mann. Elliott puts the toe on it, and the kick is good! Oh, what a kick it is by Elliott. He drilled it. Pedigree of championship teams. There goes Hurts to the end zone, and the Eagles have won it in overtime.
But, as Bills fans, we're used to being on the wrong side of those type of games.
I'll tell you, I don't know how old you are. I'm old enough, and I'm not a Bills fan, but I'm old enough to remember those Super Bowls. Man, Scott Norwood, right? Was it Scott Norwood who missed them?
That's the legend in Buffalo. And I actually feel bad for him because, like, can you imagine being
Now Norwood tries to kick his longest ever on grass, 47 yards. 8 seconds left. Adam Lingner will snap it. No good. Wide right.
There are photographers and people all over the field, but the clock still has 4 seconds on it.
You know, and there's a lot of reasons people lose football games. It's never because of one specific thing. I was a little kid during the Jim Kelly era of things, but I do remember just my whole life, it's been just tragic with the Bills.
Yeah.
Even since the Josh Allen era, when we've been good, it's still just tragic.
Yeah. Someday, maybe someday. I'll tell you, Allen's great. So I feel like they've got a shot, and they've got some players around him too.
Players, they just need to
they need to execute. So I wanted to ask you, just to go back, you played in Vegas at the Vegas Stadium, and you played in Atlanta. Did you do the Star Spangled Banner? Is that what you did there?
No, I did a couple private events at the stadiums where they were like, you know, special parties at the stadiums. So I was, the Femmes of Rock performed in Atlanta, actually, the whole band, actually both places, the Femmes of Rock performed. So they were kind of special events at the stadium, but it was really cool. Yeah. I got to like go out on the field and take photos. And of course, when we played at Allegiant Stadium, you know, where the Raiders play, I wore my Josh Allen jersey to the sound check. And then I went to all these different places throughout the stadium, like the locker rooms and the field. And I took pictures of me with my Josh Allen jersey all over, just like, you know, drinking their water and like, you know.
That's great. So, I mean, wouldn't it make sense though, for you to play the national anthem before one of these? I mean, I know that in Seattle, Mike McCready of Pearl Jam, they go, the Mariners have him come and play the national anthem before baseball games. The Seahawks have had him do it a couple of times. It just makes sense. Like, the Bills should do this. What can we do? Can we do something?
I gotta find someone that works. I don't know people there. I
feel like
I'm an East Coaster that's lived my whole adult life on the West Coast, so I don't know anybody, but someone will see it eventually. It'll happen.
I mean, we're in the age of social media. Like, this should happen like for the next home game, practically, you know, if they don't have anyone booked yet. But you should do like a video wearing your Josh Allen jersey, do the Star Spangled Banner, and get maybe Josh Allen actually would find that on Twitter, you know.
I actually have an idea to do it. You know how the Bills have the shout song that's been their song since forever. You know, that's their, like, you have the Eagles fight song, right?
Eagles fight, yeah.
We have the Bills shout song, and I actually have an idea for like a reworked, different version of that will be really cool. So maybe when I launch that, it'll get the viewership it needs to get me to high mark.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just feel like that would be a very cool thing, and it would just make a lot of sense. Like, why shouldn't you be there doing the national anthem on the violin? Nobody's seen that before, really, you know?
I went to a Bills game right before in November when I went to do my Hall of Fame induction. Last minute, decided to go with my cousin, and we ended up like 2 rows behind the Bills bench on the 50-yard line.
I saw you post about that, yeah.
Yeah, and a few people recognized me from my videos that have been shared in the Bills Mafia page. So enough of the Bills Mafia has seen the videos that they even recognize me in the stadium. So hopefully someone who books the entertainment will see.
Yeah, we got this. Has to happen. Hopefully it will happen. Okay.
If I end up playing for the Eagles before the Bills, then that's a problem. Like if they call me, or if I play for the Eagles the national anthem before I play for the Bills, that's a problem.
Well, what would happen then? Would you have to become an Eagles fan?
I'd probably still wear my Josh Allen jersey.
That could be dangerous down there in Philly. Let me just.
Oh, I know. I'm aware.
Okay.
Stuff too.
Let's move along here. Couple more that I saw that I really like. I love the t-shirts that you wear, and I noticed a lot of times you'll do a song and you'll be wearing a t-shirt from like another artist. And so one that caught my eye is you were doing "Sweet Child of Mine," Guns N' Roses solo, and you were wearing a Doors shirt.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really cool, because I'm a huge Doors fan, and I, you know, obviously I love Guns N' Roses too.
Sure.
So that was great. So talk a little bit about your t-shirt strategy, I guess, if you have one. Are you trying to kind of pay homage to two artists at once? Is that what you're doing?
Oh, okay. So the whole t-shirt thing to begin with, it was a conscious decision. Like these are things that sometimes female musicians need to think about that maybe men musicians don't need to think about.
Okay.
I was like, when you're on stage and you're selling tickets to a show and you've got lights, you have to dress somewhat flashy on stage because you're a performer and you're headlining. But I was like, when I started putting out these videos, I don't want to wear my stage clothes in my home, like to record these things. I feel like if I do that, people are going to give me a really hard time. Like if I'm wearing like really revealing clothing, they're going to be like, the only reason you're getting views is because you're showing your body or whatever. So I was like, I'm just going to wear t-shirts and jeans in every single one of my videos. It's the way I dress regularly. Like if I'm just not doing a show and I'm going out to Starbucks or something, I'm just going to wear this. This is what I'm going to look like right here. Yeah. So I made a conscious decision to only wear t-shirts and jeans so that nobody could, and still people do say it. They're like, oh, you only rely on your sexuality to get. I'm like, I'm wearing, what do you want me to wear?
Yeah.
Garbage bag, like come on.
Yeah.
So anyways, I chose to wear t-shirts. In the beginning I didn't have that many. I had some, so I couldn't always wear the artists that I was performing. Now I've amassed like this huge collection where it's like every row in my closet is either band t-shirts or Bill's shirts. Like I got Buffalo. Wow. I got bands. So I have a pretty large collection now, and I can match up the artist to the video, to the t-shirt a lot better. But in the beginning, I didn't have a lot of choice. I just had a few. So that's kind of why they don't all match up. But I'm a big Doors fan too. And I feel like Jim Morrison doesn't always get the credit he deserves. Like I think it stems from like men just not liking the fact that he looked good in leather pants. Like a lot of men can't handle that. So they don't like Jim Morrison, just I think because of that fact. Really
interesting. I haven't heard that theory before. But there is a lot of weird, some people like me and other guys. I had a guy on this podcast who wrote a book about the Doors, and he obviously loves the Doors and whatnot. So there's some people that love it, but there is a lot of Doors hate out there. I don't fully understand. I don't either. And you think it's guys that can't deal with Morrison in leather pants, huh?
Usually I find that it's men that don't like the Doors. I find more than women, men don't like the Doors, really? And specifically Jim Morrison that they don't like. And I think it has a little bit to do with maybe subconsciously being threatened by his whole thing. But I call it the leather pants theory.
That's an interesting one, Nina. I haven't heard that before. It could be. I don't personally get why people don't like Morrison. I thought he was such an interesting guy, and I really disliked how he was portrayed in the movie. You probably saw the Oliver Stone movie. Like they just didn't get him, they just caricaturized him, I thought. But anyway, let's take a quick look at you doing that with the Doors shirt on. So here is Nina doing Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine, wearing a Doors shirt. Okay, so that was great. And now, have you done any Doors songs? I don't think I've seen you do any Doors songs, and or maybe is one coming up.
So I used to do some Doors things in various cover bands that I played in. We did Light My Fire, and we did I think Break On Through. We did Roadhouse Blues. We did a few songs in the band that I used to play mostly bass in, actually. But I did learn and transcribe the keyboard solo in Light My Fire, and I have a good sound for it, so I think I will record that eventually. And last year I saw the Doors had a contest where they wanted people to like show their covers of guitar solos or things from Doors songs. There would be a winner, they'd feature the video. And unfortunately, I think I was on tour at the time that I saw it, and I didn't have enough time. I wasn't home in the studio to do it, or I would have submitted something probably, because I do love the Doors.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'd love to hear the you doing that I mean, that's an epic keyboard solo from Light My Fire. That's like, what is it, like 3 minutes or something, you know, 3 minutes.
Sure. It's awesome.
Very cool. Oh, you know, actually too, the Doors have a song that has some good violin in it. Touch Me, the end of it has a violin solo in it, right?
Oh yeah, that's one of the songs we did in one of the bands that I play in Las Vegas. We would cover that and I'd play the violin part.
Yeah. What do you think of that violin part? Is that a good one, or?
Yeah, and it's kind of obviously you know, the horns and strings, like it works really well. And we used to have a really great singer in this band called the Lon Bronson All-Star Band in Las Vegas. And I used to play with them all the time. And then, you know, since I start touring more, it was hard to do, but amazing horn band. And then I'd play electric violin and I'd play a lot of the guitar stuff on the violin, like solos, but I'd also play string stuff. So if the song had backing violin, that's why we used to do Touch Me in that band, because it worked well with the horns and the backing strings and everything like that.
Yeah. And so that's a good segue into rock songs that actually have violin in them. Because I guess there's a fair amount out there. You know, I think like Baba O'Reilly's probably the one that might come to most quickly to mind for most people. But, you know, one of my favorites, and I've seen you do it, and you do it where you're playing actually you're doing two violin tracks. That is the Kansas song Dust by the Wind, which is just such a great song. So you're doing the vocal melody on violin, and then you're doing, I guess, the regular violin part from that song. Is that
actually in the video that I posted? One is a violin and one is a viola. So on the recording, there's a violin and a viola, and they're both playing that. It's not just one. Everyone thinks it's just one violin playing that part, but there's like a call and answer thing going on between the two parts. So if you notice, one of the instruments is huge that I'm playing.
Yes. Yeah. I noticed that now.
That's the viola. It's a lot bigger. It sounds lower. It has lower string than the violin does. So that is a viola. And then the smaller one is a violin.
So it almost looks like a bass. Is that like what a bass is to a guitar, that a viola is to a violin? Is that like
the hierarchy of string instruments in an orchestra? The violin is the highest sounding. The viola is like in the alto clef, so it's like middle sounding. Then the cello is below the viola, and then the contrabass, the big stand up, that's the lowest sounding instrument. So there's kind of like, you know, 4 top to bottom string instruments that sound highest to lowest, and the viola is the second lowest below the violin.
Got it. So basically you're saying, that was a nice way of saying, no, Andrew, it's not like the bass. Is that where?
Well, the bass is like the bass.
The bass is the bass. Yeah. Okay. All right. Very cool. Let's take a quick look at you doing that. With a viola and a violin. Really cool. Here's that now. Kansas, Dust in the Wind. That's really awesome. And how does it feel to do a song like that where you're not plugged in, you're playing, you know, a regular violin and a viola, sort of, you know, without the electric aspect?
It's always nice to go back to like real instruments, because they're actually easier to play. So it's nice to record with the overhead mic and using real instruments and not having to mess with all of the more stuff that you have to plug in anywhere. The more cables there are, the more things there are to troubleshoot, the more electronics that, you know. It's nice to just be able to, like with a violin, there's very minimal problems. If something's not working, it's not, if something electronic isn't working, it could be a million things. So it's much easier to deal with an acoustic violin.
Now, one thing I know about you is you seem to be a huge fan of John Lennon, and you and I think it's Brody, right? Your husband Brody. You and him maybe a couple of years ago did um, a version of his Christmas song, "Happy Christmas, War is Over." So, talk to me first a bit about what why Lennon has been such a big influence in your life, and sort of when you kind of became aware of him and the Beatles and so forth.
I would say John Lennon was probably the first and the first time someone had an impact on me that just basically when I discovered them and everything they were about and the music they made and the lyrics they wrote and the things they said in interviews, it just like knocked me back and completely changed my life was John Lennon. And I remember one summer being a little kid, my parents still had some like records in the basement from when they were kids. And one of them was Abbey Road. And I remember finding it and they still had a record player. And my best friend and I, we figured out how to use it and we played the record all summer long. It was like we knew the songs, even though we didn't know them. And then from there, I went to every other Beatles album. And then I went to all of John's solo stuff. I was able to, obviously, like John Lennon died before I was born. There was no way I would ever know him. And that was, I think, it was just one of those things that like you almost felt like you knew him, like hearing his voice. Whenever I hear his voice on the radio, it's like you're hearing an old friend kind of. And the words that he wrote, I think were honest. I think every lyric that he wrote, it wasn't just like a lot of times when you think about how people write music now, they get together and have a songwriting session and there's like, it's very corporate feeling and you're trying to write a hit. Like you sit down and you're like, okay, well, who can contribute this and who can contribute this? And I think the hook needs to be, but it's very corporate and it's very sterile. And I think that it's people trying to contrive a song. And I feel like when John wrote music, it was things that were directly related to his life and that the lyrics meant a lot to him. And he was trying to give something to people on an emotional level that was a lot higher than what I think a lot of today's mainstream music does. Like they serve a different purpose. And I think John's honesty and of course his wit and his humor, and the great songs that he wrote, all of those things combined, I think at a young age, it really hit me hard. And he was like my favorite from the time I was, 10, 11 years old, something like that. Wow. And on the 40th anniversary of his death, which would have been in 2020, that's when we did that video because I wanted to do something special, right on that date.
Yeah. So that was really great. And then you do some singing in that as well.
A little bit.
And so let's talk about that song too. We're recording this a couple of weeks before Christmas. So that, we were in our house, we were decorating our Christmas tree the other night and that song was on and there's something about it that's very timeless. I feel like, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's timeless because there's always a war going on, it seems like, or there's always some like fighting. And the message of it seems to apply,
Thing about John Lennon's music, it's timeless. And that in particular, I agree with. And the same thing with Imagine and the same thing with a lot of the stuff he wrote with the Beatles. The same thing with none of it sounds dated. It still works, 50 years later, decades after his death, the music doesn't sound dated and it's still relevant and generations still discover it. There's children now, my children, my daughter who's 3 years old is like obsessed with the Beatles, although Ringo is her favorite. She's got pictures of Ringo all over her little room with yellow submarines everywhere. But, their music is discovered by generation after generation, and it means something strong to each generation that discovers it. And I think that's a rare thing that not many bands or artists have.
Yeah. And that song particularly, I mean, do you like it as a Christmas song? Do you view it more as a Christmas song or do you just love it as a great John Lennon song any time of year?
Writing a great Christmas song, it's like to really be able to capture those two things, a great song and a great holiday message or whatever. It's not the easiest thing to do. And some people just sound dumb when they do it. And John definitely didn't sound dumb. Like he's taking a great song that is a holiday classic it works as a holiday song. You got the jingle bells in it and everything else. And the melody is catchy and everything else, but he's putting his Johnness into it. He's like taking these lyrics and, he's doing sort of an activist thing and he's having people look at themselves and look at what's going on. And I don't know if you've seen the official music video on YouTube for that song on his
I don't know
channel.
if I have, no.
But it's, it'll make you cry. It's like showing a lot of things that go on in the world that we take for granted that aren't going on in our homes this Christmas. So I think just making people aware that we're like one people and that we're all not so lucky. I think it helps you to pray for people that aren't in your own small circle, I think.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick, short look at you and your husband Brody doing that song from a few years ago. Okay, so great song, as I said, and gets, I don't know, for me that gets me in the Christmas spirit. And the song obviously plays a lot around Christmas time. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about too is that some of the artists who you've whose music you've covered and you've put out have seen it. So tell me about the reaction that you've gotten from some of the musicians out there who've seen their work kind of coming out of your violin.
Well, luckily it's all been positive so far. Nobody's contacted me and been like, you suck. So that's
that's good.
In the right direction.
Yeah.
I think like it's funny because like it started with like, I think the first time someone recognized one of them was Richie Sambora retweeted my cover of Living on a Prayer. And in that one, I like managed to do those kind of false pinch harmonics that he does in that solo in that song. And a lot of people were like, how'd she do that on a violin? And I actually did a separate video where I explained how I did those harmonics. But anyway, I think the tone sounded quite a bit like the original, and he left a nice message and retweeted it on his page. And so that was like the first time someone had recognized it. And I know like Neil Sean from Journey liked my cover of one of his solos that I did on Twitter. And Peter Frampton's actually reposted on a couple different platforms with a nice message, my Do You Feel talk box solo on his Twitter page and on his Facebook page. And Michael Anthony from Van Halen has commented on a bunch of my stuff. And Alex Lifeson from Rush, one of my heroes, like managed to comment on the Limelight solo and hear it. And just the fact that these people hear these things is just incredible to me, because I never imagined that when I started doing these videos. But and to have them like approve of them is better. Like, whew.
Yeah, I know. So I saw Frampton's comment, which I thought was really nice. That's got to feel amazing, right? To get that approval.
Definitely. I mean, like I said, I grew up listening to mostly guitar players. I listened to classical music and I listened to violinists, but that was more like a job to me to be doing that. And what I loved was guitar players. And so a lot of these people were my heroes, either growing up or in college or when I was first, getting serious about music. And everything that I cover, it means something to me, something different. And so to have feedback from those original artists that have meant something to me and my life and my musical career, it's kind of like it's a nice payback for the hard work that goes into learning these solos. Because like I said, people see a 30-second video and they think that, oh, well, she just we're that together, good, but it's not. Like, for instance, like the Limelight solo, the Rush Limelight solo, it took like a long time just trying to figure out how much of a distance to use the whammy and when I should use slides and when I should use the whammy and how far those little mathematical things like took forever. And then once it was figured out, it was like 4 takes and I laid the solo down. But there's a lot of work that people don't see that goes into trying to make it sound like the original.
So you're doing like a lot of tinkering, right? You're probably, is that what it's like? You're like, let me try the pedal this much. And then you're like, no, maybe that's not enough. And then that's too much, right?
Exactly. Because there's no rule book or playbook for what I'm doing on the violin. As a guitar player, if you want to know the exact settings and tools that Eddie Van Halen used on whatever song, you can just go on the internet and you can know his exact settings for every single pedal and at least you can get your basic sound, the way that he had it. But for a violin, there's absolutely nothing that I can turn to. Like, how do I sound like Jimmy Page or Eddie Van Halen or whoever? How do I sound like them on a violin? There's no Googling that to figure it out. You have to I have to do it,
Yeah, you gotta You
that
got to
are
engineer it yourself. Yeah.
try and figure it out. And, I'll do some pre-work on it and research, and I'll have to mess with the settings and practice it a lot to get it right. Cause some of the stuff is awkward on a violin. It doesn't, something that fits in the hand on a guitar that's tuned differently doesn't fit in the hands on a violin that's tuned in fifths the same way. So it's a lot of work, more
Yeah.
than people think it is.
Have you ever like abandoned doing a song because you're once you got into it, you're just like, this isn't working, or this I can't get it just how
Not
it sounds.
not completely, but I needed to get some new tools. Like there were times when I'm learning some things by Eddie Van Halen specifically, where I bought a pedal, returned it, bought a pedal, returned it like 7, 8 times, bought something, returned it because I thought it would work a certain way and it didn't work on the violin for what I was trying to do. So there were times when I've had to like stop, start from square one, stop, start from square one. A lot of it's trial and error. And it's not like you can walk into any music store and just have them have things in stock. Like I can't just go
Right.
try pedals with my violin. Like everything's online now. So you have to have it shipped to you, ship it back, have it shipped to you, ship it back.
Oh
And
my God. Yeah.
so I finally got like the right combination of things, but it was like probably 6 months to a year of testing different combinations of pedals in the effects chains,
Wow.
try and be able to do certain techniques. And it was like a lot of noise trying to figure out the hand technique to do it because it's different than on a guitar, totally different.
Yeah.
Again, it's a lot of work, but hopefully someday people can watch my videos and have an easier time with it than I did. So
Yeah. So, I mean, I know what you said earlier about each guitar player sort of being hard for some specific reason or whatever, but it just sounds to me like Eddie Van Halen may be the most challenging. You can't just sit down and figure it out that easily for
I
his
think
stuff.
because his sound is so very recognizable and specific, and the techniques that he used are so recognizable and specific, and there's not an easy way to translate that to violin. So the figuring out process of how to do it on violin is harder, I think.
Yeah.
But now that I've figured out some of that stuff, it's going to go faster. So the
Yeah.
next things I do, I think I'll have a much faster time doing. The first few things that I was still figuring out how to even make those sounds, that took the longest. So yes, I think in the beginning, it was definitely harder to figure out how to make those sounds, but I think that it'll be a little bit better moving forward now.
I think I saw an interview. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it was an interview with Eddie Van Halen or maybe somebody else who said, maybe it was his son actually, who said that he used to make his own guitars. And that's part of why his sound is so hard to replicate,
Right.
even on a guitar, like never mind trying to do it on a violin.
For sure. I mean, people are still trying to do what he did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah. I'm wondering too, have you ever run into any issues with like bands or not even the bands, but maybe like the record company or music label being like super protective of their songs and like saying like, no, like take that down because we don't want anyone doing any versions of
oh
our.
yeah, I got issued my first copyright strike on YouTube, maybe like 2 months ago. And can you guess what artist it was?
Hmm. Well, it'd be hard let me take a guess. And I'm gonna guess either was it Guns N' Roses?
No, it wasn't Guns N' Roses.
Floyd?
It
No.
was the Eagles, of
Oh,
course.
really?
They're the
Yeah.
worst. Like you can't cover their music. They don't want you to cover it. So I had done a cover of Hotel California. I did this whole
Wow.
explanation about how I used two different violins and how I got the tones, and I had it, down. And it was kind of more of like a tutorial thing even than a
Yeah.
performance. I was talking about how I used two different violins and got the different sounds for both parts of the solo. And so I got issued a copyright strike and I removed it. So you won't find it on any of my platforms now.
Wow.
Hotel California is gone
It's
from
gone. That's yeah, that's really a shame. And it seems so short-sighted on their part. All you're doing is, creating more interest in their song.
Well,
Uh,
that's the thing. This is how music will live on. Like maybe
right.
right now people still know these bands and who they are, but 1 or 2 generations from now, if you don't let someone new, no
Yeah.
one will find your recording anymore. It's like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense because they can claim 100% of the ad revenue Like a lot of the bands do that. Like I'll cover something, I don't make money on it, but they get to make the money on it. So whatever ads get put on the video, the original publisher,
Goes
the
back to
band
them.
make money. And so
Yeah.
it's free money, you know? It's like if
Yeah.
my video gets 5 million views, you've just made all the ad revenue. And if 1,000 people make a video of your music that gets 5 million views, all that ad revenue is just going to you.
Yeah.
So it's like monetarily, I'm not, I don't know. Rick Beato, you know who he is?
Yeah, I was just going to bring him up actually, because that my guesses were based on like who I've seen him complain about.
He's got some great videos about this topic, and he makes all the points better than I can make them. So, people should watch his videos. He's brilliant.
Oh, yeah, he's amazing. And one of the things I really like about him, and I think I like about you too, is there's sort of this you both are sort of paying homage to this music, I think with Beato, he like what I've watched a lot of his stuff has been the What Makes This Song Great series that he
Right.
does, where he really breaks down like what's happening with each instrument and each song, and he'll like isolate a track and whatever. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is actually what MTV should be or should have been at some point.
Absolutely, for sure.
And
Such valuable information. He's such a
yeah,
good musician. He knows his music theory. He explains things in a way that's entertaining for people
yeah.
to watch the entire video. Even if you're not a studied musician, you still gain something from watching the videos, and I've learned a lot from them. So he's like definitely one of those gems out there on the internet.
Yeah. And I mean, he just like pushes a button and then he's like, here, just listen to the bass part here. And it's like all you hear is the bass. And I'm like, wow. Um, yeah, he's great. Love him. I've actually reached out to him and tried to get him to come on. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would love to talk to him because I don't know. I haven't seen any interviews with him. I mean, I see him a lot and he obviously,
He
uh,
interviews other people. He's got famous
right.
people that he interviews.
Of
But yeah, I
course.
don't know. I think he might originally be from Rochester, New
I
York,
think
not far from where I'm from.
I
But
think he went to like Ithaca or maybe taught at Ithaca for a while, Ithaca
I'm not
University.
really sure about his background, but I thought I heard that he was from close to where I'm
Yeah,
from.
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, he's amazing. But I think the two of you have this. You're doing something great for rock music to keep it going on, and I want to talk a little bit about the state of rock music in a minute. But also wanted to talk to. So there's the issue sometimes with the occasional band that gets all hot and bothered by you doing a song, but you've also run into a little bit of criticism just from some trolls on social media too. It sounds like you did a big tweet on it, and people, I guess, are upset that you're not doing original music. Is that what the problem is?
You can't please everyone, but a lot of times on these videos, the thing about the internet is people see one like 20-second clip, and then they're too lazy to figure out anything else, and they think that's all there is that 20-second clip. So it's like, okay, so you just watched me play a cover of Comfortably Numb, but did you even Google my name to see anything else? Like, first of all, they think you're a fake. You don't do anything else. Like, if you just do a quick Google search, you'll see all my live performances that I've done with other artists and that I'm still doing now. You can come see it on tour if you want to, but people don't do that. They're lazy. And then some people will give you a hard time saying like, here's the thing. If you just put original music out there without having a fan base, no one will listen to it.
Yeah.
Like, people want to hear songs that they know. And then if you just put covers out there to build your fan base, then people are like, all you're doing is copying other people's work. You don't know how to do anything on your own. So my whole background because you watched me play Comfortably Numb and that's all you know about me. Like, I've been writing music since I was 13 years old. I haven't put it out there because I'm busy performing. Like, my whole life I've been performing. So yeah, some people will give me a hard time about that. But like, I think I know the post you're talking about. It's so crazy to me as a classically trained violinist that people have a hard time with reperforming this difficult guitar repertoire on an instrument that it's not typically performed on, because what do classical musicians do? If you play in a symphony orchestra, if you're a virtuoso touring soloing classical violinist, what music are you playing? You're not playing music that's decades old. You're playing music that's centuries old.
Yeah.
I mean, why does the New York Philharmonic play Mahler and Beethoven? Why do they play it? Because they're
over and over again, right? Like I thought you were 100% right about that. just play, why can't you just do something different and play it over? Like these are classic songs. Granted, they're not whatever accepted by like the highbrow
It's a
music.
different genre, but it's
Yeah.
definitely part of the staple repertoire that people
Yeah.
should learn, that students should learn, that people should be able to see performed decades and centuries after these original artists are dead. Like,
Yeah.
why should rock and prog music be any different than classical music repertoire? So if you cover classical music, you're well respected, and
Yeah.
but if you cover rock and prog music, you're just a copier. What's the difference? To me, it doesn't make sense why people say that. But
Yeah, I don't understand that either. I mean, I sort of understand it that it's like, classical music is like very learned and it survived the centuries. So it stood the test of time in some ways. But also, man, the music from the 60s, 70s, I mean, I think all the way up through the 90s too, is just so amazing. And it's good to hear it. It's good to hear it, right? And then it's good to hear it in some other forms like what you're doing.
yeah, I mean, like people say, oh, people have just done this a million times. I'm like, find me one other video where someone is playing this particular solo on a fretted 7-string violin.
Well, that's the other thing too. That is very unique.
Yeah, people are they'll find something to complain about no matter what.
That is true. Now, do you find yourself reading the comments a lot? Are you reading all the comments, or do you try to ignore it? What's your
It depends. Like sometimes if I post a video and if it's in the process of going viral, I can't even see all of them. It happens too fast. There's too many things coming in. So if I happen to like click on, I'll maybe see the first couple things and that's it. So sometimes, and unfortunately, like the way the algorithms work on social media, they want to keep people engaged on the post. And a lot of times that happens with the negative things. So the negative comments get pushed to the top, and they're the things that I see first and the things that other people see first because they're going to cause engagement on the post.
Yeah.
Like if I say one thing, then 100 people will pile on and it'll be a whole thing that'll go on long after I'm done commenting. But sometimes I feel like people need to be put in their place about things. Like, so occasionally I'll make a remark and try and do that, but
I think that makes sense. You definitely should do that. But I was looking too, you do get some good positive feedback as well. I feel and that's good as well. I'm sure that makes you feel good, right?
It's mostly positive feedback. Yeah. I mean, there are a few negative comments a day. And obviously, like the more views you get, the more chance you're going to get negativity. Like if your video's got 5 or 10 million views on it, people are going to say stupid things. So knowing when to ignore them and when to make a stand on it, I think is something I'm still learning. It's hard for me as a, New York Italian to ignore it.
That's funny. Well, let's talk a little bit about that in a sec. But I want to ask you too. So we've been talking all about rock music. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the Spotify. The thing Spotify does every year, the Wrapped for 2023.
Yeah.
I'll actually put it up here real quick so we can sort of look at it quickly together. I mean, here it is. Are you seeing that, Nina?
Yes.
So here it is. Here's the top 10 artists globally. I don't know. I don't know all these people. Maybe I sound old or something, but I don't think there's a single rock person here, right? Is there? I mean,
well,
maybe
I don't know who some of them are, but I don't think anyone's really rock.
I like the closest thing to that maybe would be Lana Del Rey, right? But even that is not that would be stretching it big time, right? And then it's the same sort of thing in the songs, right? It to me it seems like a mix of like pop, hip hop, country, and pop, I guess, more pop,
Yeah.
And then even like the albums, like not even a rock album is able to break into the top 10 globally. Why do you think that is? What is with the state of rock music? It almost feels to me like it's dead or like on life support at the very best at this point.
Sometimes Brody and I will have this conversation. We'll be like, what do you think the last band was? Like, what was the last great band that they just have so many good songs? And he'll say probably U2. Like he'll be like, U2 is like the last great band that had great songs. They play their instruments and, everything else like that. And we actually got to see them opening up the Sphere here in Vegas.
Oh, you saw that? Oh,
That
that's
opening
amazing.
night. It was pretty incredible experience to see that. And then me being, you know, like I think I have a little bit more knowledge of 90s music. So I'll go so far to go into the 90s and be like, well, you know, I think there were even bands then, like there obviously you got Nirvana, you got even Matchbox 20 and bands that still like were bands.
Yeah.
But I think after the 90s it kind of dies a little bit. I think that's the point where it changed. And I think part of it is probably due to technology and what we have and what's popular among young people. I think it's unfortunate because for a long time rock reigned, you know, for decades.
Yeah.
It was the cool thing. And there've been some throwback bands that come on and kind of do things that are kind of like that. And I think the hardest part is just being able to be creative and just putting out good songs. Like it's not easy to put out a great song. And I often think of that. Like sometimes we'll be watching YouTube at night and we'll come across like, oh, you know, the top songs from every week in 1974. And like every single song is an iconic, like one of the greatest songs ever written. I'm like, could you imagine that now? Like every top song from every week throughout the whole year of 2023 being a generational, iconic, just like great song. And it's so different, but I know there's some of it has to do with taste. Like I was born like an 80-year-old Italian man. So my taste is a little bit older than, you know, like I've never been even into my own generation. I've always been a few behind with my musical tastes. But I know some people, they're really into it, like the electronic music scene, the DJ music scene, like that's their thing. So it's like, I don't know why it went that way with the majority of what people want to hear. But, you know, I don't feel like rock is totally ruled out. I just feel like it's been a while since there's been a U2 or a.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has something to do with, you know, what's out there today and what's popular and how hard it is to break through that, right? So like, so obviously you've got Taylor Swift right now is like the biggest thing, and sort of every genre right now has somebody that's huge. I think like Drake is huge. I don't even know who's on that. I mean, he might be on that list, right? Bad Bunny, The Weeknd, Drake is on that list. If so, there's like each of these genres is represented except for rock, and I don't know how they break into that. So like I think about it in terms of like what if Nirvana didn't show up then and just burst onto the scene right now with their songs? Would they even be able to break through this? You know, and if that was the, you know, if they couldn't break through this, would they even be considered? You know, now they're icons, right? But
The one good thing about the age of the internet is that anything is possible, and you never know exactly what that's going to be. Like as a violinist, look at Lindsey Sterling. She's had, you know, radio hits and Billboard hits, and she's selling out large venues. And she became popular by making these YouTube videos that went viral. And she writes this kind of crossover genre music. And although it's different than the kind of music I play, like who would have thought that a violinist who dances would be topping charts and selling albums and at this level? So it's like no one would have guessed that something like that would have happened, but the internet kind of made that possible.
sure. Yeah.
You know, I have like a timeline of things I need to accomplish over the next few months. And after I accomplish 2 of them, the next thing is going to be to start recording my original album. And hopefully I'll be able to put something good out there into the world. And I feel like if I do that, you know, hopefully the right people will hear it and like it. Maybe I can contribute something a little bit new and different to rock music.
Yeah. And so that's going to be like a rock album, essentially.
That's the weird thing. Like all of the songs that I've written my whole life, it's like very, you know, all over the place. Like some of them are like prog instrumental sounding, and some of them are like Bob Dylan singer songwriter sounding with lyrics. I have an English degree, so I went through a phase of writing like, you know, poetry type lyrics, and I couldn't even pick 10 of them and put them on an album and have it be somewhat coherent in a genre because they're that different. But maybe it doesn't need to be. Like, does an album need to be coherent in a genre, or can it just be a little bit of everything?
Yeah. I mean, especially these days, you know, where albums just aren't what they used to be, you know?
More of an album, so it almost doesn't even matter. I
Yeah.
mean,
So in that tweet we were talking about, where you kind of responded to some of the critics, you did put a little bit of an original song in there, and that, to me, that sounded pretty heavy. That almost sounded, I mean, I don't know, that sounded a little like heavy metalish to me. Is that
yeah,
right? Is
yeah,
that
that's
what-
kind of my roots a little bit. Like I take something from every a band or guitar player that I've listened to over the years and help to kind of formulate my violin style from that. And I think if people didn't see the video for that, they wouldn't know that that was even a violin playing. There was no
Yeah.
guitars at all on that recording. Even the rhythm guitar sounding thing, that was my 7-string violin. And
Wow.
then the lead part was my 6-string violin. I did play a bass guitar, but there were no regular guitars on that track.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. That sounded great. So I can't wait. Maybe that'll be on the album. Is that going to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
part?
definitely. It'll be finished on the album.
So here's another thing I want to ask you about, and that is, you've worked with so many big names, and you've worked with some pop stars too. So you've worked with like Beyonce, Toni Braxton, Shakira. Um, you know, is there anything you can tell us from having worked with them that like can explain or help rock music survive better, or what did you learn? What was that experience like?
I think I've learned something different from every gig that I've had or every artist that I perform with. And I remember in the Toni Braxton show, there weren't violin charts. So basically, I had to listen to what the set list was going to be, and I had to create my own parts for a lot of this stuff. So
Wow.
it really helped me with being able to find something that made sense within the context of her music and to do it, and and also be a part of a Vegas stage show. So there was a bit of theatrics that were involved in that as well. Like at one point during the show, I had to get to the top of this big riser with a spotlight and like kind of this Godfather style solo that went into like a hip hop type song. And so I got a lot of experience learning how shows work and learning how to put together a show, because production shows are different than rock concerts. And I think that the Femmes of Rock, it like walks that edge between being a rock concert and a production show. It's kind of more of a production show. And my stage experience with some of these artists who had residencies in Vegas, I think that really helped me be able to develop and produce my own show. So even if the musical content isn't something that's helping me become a better soloist as a rock violinist, I
Right.
still learned a lot of things about the business beyond that in those types of performances.
Sure. And even I think was one of your first gigs working with Wayne Newton.
That was my very first professional. That was why I moved to Las Vegas. I got a job playing in Wayne Newton's orchestra, and then I decided to get my master's degree while I was living here. So I ended up doing that at the same time I was playing in his band. So that was my first pro gig, really.
Yeah. And what was it like? What was he like? What was it like playing with Wayne Newton? Is he even alive? I don't even know if he's alive
Yeah,
still.
yeah, he's alive.
He is?
So
Yeah. Just a quick interruption here. Wayne Newton is not just alive, he's alive and well. So sorry about that, Wayne. You're obviously a living legend. He's not just alive, but he's still even performing in Vegas with a residency called Up Close and Personal. And there he was just a couple of months ago on the Today Show, talking all about it. So sorry about that, Wayne. Just hadn't heard your name in a while.
I knew who he was because of the National Lampoon movie that I had seen, Vegas, National Lampoon's
Yeah,
Vegas.
Vegas Vacation. Yeah.
So he had this like legendary status about him because I had seen him in that movie, and so I was like, oh, it's the guy from the movie. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know prior to that, but he was like old school Vegas. So he was it was almost like, and some of the people in his band had played with Sinatra because they were still those first call players in Vegas from back in the Rat Pack days. And so it was like getting to be a part of history in a way, being like in his band with some of these musicians that had played in these big bands and these lounges back in the glory days of Las Vegas. I mean, they played with Elvis and they played with Frank Sinatra, and it was, you know, pretty legendary. And so just getting, and in that show, what I experienced was there were a stack of charts like this, music charts for all the songs that Wayne Newton had done over the years. And they'd sit like next to you on the stage, next to your music stand. And sometimes the show would be set, and sometimes Wayne would just call a song. And so you'd have to rifle through it and stick it in front of you. And then they would tell you, okay, he's going to sing it in D flat today. So then not only are you sight reading a chart that you've never seen before in your life to a song you've never heard, you're also transposing it on the spot to a different key with totally different fingerings on your instrument. And you were expected to be able to do this. And every like first call show player in Vegas from back in the day, that's what they did. If you played with Sinatra, if you played with Elvis, you were expected to know how to transpose your parts, to sight read charts that you've never seen before, didn't prepare. It was part of the job. And so I think a lot of experience doing that. And that was like my biggest takeaway from that show, was just having those old school chops for those old school skills that were instilled in me during that time period.
Sure. And do people still behave this way today? Like, or is everything really just sticking to the script, you know, hardcore nowadays?
My show, I wrote all of my charts on computer software. And if we want to do something in a different key because a singer's coming in, I just go click and I can transpose it down the sheet music to another key. Wow. But with paper charts, with like an old school show like that, you're not just, you know, you have to transpose it in your head. You're not transposing it with the click of a keyboard. So
you're saying like your musicians, they're looking at a chart essentially like on an iPad or something, some digital screen?
Well, my show is memorized now, but yes, my backing musicians, when we play locally, I use a backing orchestra of like all my string players for the show. And I have all the music loaded into iPads, and I have software for editing it. So on the fly, if we needed, not that we change the key on the fly because we're not singing really, but if we needed to, it would be as simple as, you know, making one click on that and then exporting it in airdropping it to their iPad. Just click airdrop. Okay, there it is. You know, there's the chart. It would be simple.
Wow, that's
it's
awesome.
A skill that you don't necessarily need these days because of technology, but it's a skill that I'm glad that I learned.
That you learned it, and you sort of learned it, you know, the old school way too, right?
Yeah.
You were talking in your speech too about some of the hard times you've had. You talked about 2 points at which you actually wanted to quit music, or maybe you did quit, I think one time, right? Tell me about that. What was what was happening? And I mean, you just seem like so musical and like this is what you're meant to do, but I guess you questioned that at some point.
The first time period was when I was nearing the end of my master's degree on classical violin. And I'd been in that world of competitions and orchestras and seating auditions for a very long time, from the point that I was a child. And there was something about all of that and a lot of the people in that world that just kind of makes you hate music, because you have to do it one way. One way is the correct way. There's no other way to do it. And you need to be the best. And if you aren't the best, you're terrible and you don't deserve to be playing music, you know? And so it was like a lot of years of very cutthroat competition and just exhaustion over the whole thing. And when you're 20 years old or 22 years old, you haven't really made your career yet. You know, I was just starting to dip a toe in the water of what I would do as a professional musician, or if I even could be a professional musician. And now if someone treated me like in the way that people talked to me back then, I'd be like, you know, but back then when you don't have like the experience and the credentials and you have no accomplishments behind you, you don't really have that much confidence in yourself. And so I became very ill, like even physically ill near the end of that time period. And I didn't know how I was going to make it through my master's recital. And I remember during the performance, like feeling like I was a couple inches above my body. Like, wow. I was like not even completely there, because I was so dizzy and sick, and just like the whole thing was strange. And I just prayed that I would get through it.
And were you playing? Were you able to get through it?
I got through it and I got my degree.
Wow.
And I did not go to graduation, and I didn't open the degree for a long time. And I didn't want to listen to music. I would have nightmares. Like I would go to sleep, and this repertoire that I was learning for my master's recital, I couldn't even get away from it in my sleep. Like I'd dream where they'd repeat themselves over and over and over again, these passages that I was working on or that I was learning. And it was like, it even haunted me in my sleep. I could not get away from it. And it was like, so I was done with music for a while. I didn't want to know anything about it.
How long was a while?
Maybe 6 months. I mean, wow. I went back to Buffalo to my family's, where my parents lived, and I didn't move back there. I kept my place, but I stayed for quite some time, and just kind of like, you know, I think maybe that happens to a lot of people in their early 20s. Like you end up back with your parents for a little while, trying to figure out who you are and what you're doing. But just being able to like eat my grandmother's home cooked food and get healthy again, and just kind of connect with family and be done with the whole scene for a little while. And then when I went back to Vegas, I just decided I wanted to do something totally different. I still wanted to love music, but I didn't want to go through what I did previously. So I learned bass guitar. I taught myself bass guitar because I figured they're always happy and laid back. So I joined a band and had a great time for a few years. And then I slowly started working violin solos in, and slowly started listening to classical repertoire and being able to appreciate it, because now I had come from a place of, I can do whatever I want standing on this stage in front of this group of drunk people, and they're going to love it. So it was like, I got confidence back again, and I learned how to just not care as much, so I could listen to this music again, because I was approaching it from a different way, a totally different way.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're having fun again with it. Is that true?
Yeah, that it was fun. I mean, I played in this all request band in the lounges of Las Vegas, and some of them were high scale lounges, and some of them were like squishy beer pong floor lounges, and those were like my favorite places. And you know, the pay is not great, and you go there and you're playing from like 10 at night till 2 in the morning or something like that. And you're lugging all your gear with you. Like I brought, you know, XLRs and 1/4-inch cables and mic stands and bass amps and violin amps and effects pedals. And I got all this stuff on a cart every night, in and out, you know, doing that by choice. This is after I had played in shows where I was featured and I had a tech that would do whatever I needed for me. You know, I chose to do this at that point, and I had fun, and it kind of became like a local hang. Like a lot of the other local musicians, after their gigs were done, they'd come hang out. Some of them would sit in with us, and I got to learn a lot of guitar solos on violin during that time, because people responded well to it. So I was like, hey, can you learn this solo, and can you learn Freebird? And then before I knew it, like people were throwing hundreds at us for me to jump on the tables to play Freebird every night. You know, it was just fun. And for a period of time in my life, it was what I needed to do to reconnect with having fun. And then after that, I focused on my show, and then that kind of took off from there.
Yeah. You said something that was interesting about not caring too much. What do you think about that? I mean, isn't it sort of weird in life how you have to care, obviously, but if you care too much, that can almost be counterproductive.
Yeah, if you care too much, you can stunt your growth with something, I think, because you overthink everything. It's like, and it's the same with any project. Like if you're doing a final mix on a recording, you could keep doing that final mix forever. You could put it away tomorrow, come back to it, find something you want to tweak. I'm going to tweak this little sound. I got to tweak. At some point, you got to say, no, it's done.
Yeah.
But do you ever really feel like something's done? Like, you know, and it's the same thing, I think, with whatever you're working on. Like Brody right now, he's building a car from scratch. He's building a 1967 Nova. And I think it's kind of the same thing as doing an audio mix. It's like, is whatever step he's working on ever really done? Is it ever really good enough? Or there's always something you could be tweaking. Like at some point you got to just say, okay, this part's done. You know, I think a lot of things are like that.
Yeah. Interesting. Now let's go back to some of the things that you learned working with, let's say like Beyonce or Shakira, or even the Killers. You worked with the Killers. Killers are a rock band, right? Like I know some of their songs. I guess they're rock music, right?
Yeah.
Did you find anything like useful in working with them? Let's say, like you talked about with Wayne Newton, how you were expected, you sort of just expected to be able to like roll with the punches whenever he wanted to change his mind or whatever. What about the Killers? Was that anything similar in that respect?
Like Brandon Flowers and Beyonce had incredible work ethic. I think though they're different genres of music, both of them had just incredible focus and work ethic. And you could tell that like he'd spent a lot of time becoming a good singer, And I think that people don't always realize like the back work that goes into the craft of what you do. And being from Vegas, we have like a little more background on some of these bands that are from Vegas than the rest of the country does, that just know them as being famous or whatever. But I remember thinking that about both of them, that they had great work ethic. And Beyonce, it was like she was going to go there. She was there the entirety of the rehearsal. And a lot of artists will not come in. They'll have someone else, like a music director, rehearse the band and the orchestra or whatever they're doing. And they'll maybe show up for like 3 minutes to do a sound check and then be done. Beyonce sat there the entire time and had an ear and a say in the whole show, like to the point where like, I'm not sure she even took a bathroom break. So
Wow.
like, I think that a lot of times people see someone's public persona and they don't realize that maybe there is a lot of hard work that's gone into that.
Yeah.
And so I think I learned to be present and to always care, by watching her work during that time frame that we worked on that show.
And what were you doing exactly did she have an orchestra? Is that what she had? Or were you
Yeah,
doing?
she had a backing string section. There was a TV special that they turned into a DVD release. I think it was called like Beyonce, I Am Yours or something like that. So we filmed it, and it was a live concert that was then put out as a DVD. Wow. And it was a small string section. Like, I don't know if there were 4 or 6 of us or something like that. But also it was one of those situations that everything didn't have arrangements written. So like one day I brought my laptop backstage and kind of like charted out some things we were doing so that we would actually have music to read. So it wasn't all,
So it sounds to me like you're actually writing some of the song then. Is that what's going on there?
A lot of the people that I performed with, I ended up doing some sort of arranging or charting of the music for it. And that's one of the things I went to school to learn how to do, like write, compose, and arrange orchestral music. So I think that's one of my better skills actually, is being able to do that and to do that on the fly. Yeah. And I for sure utilize that skill when performing with other artists.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're pretty lucky to hire you then because I mean, they're getting you obviously a great musician who can play, but then they're even getting, do they know that's what they're getting when they hire you or?
Oh, well, it depends sometimes and sometimes not.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people don't even know that I've done it. When we opened for Cheap Trick, my show got to open for Cheap Trick, and we saw the guys at the hotel. They remembered me from when I had done a couple shows in Vegas with them when they had a residency. And, they said it would be cool if we wanted to come back after our opening set and play Dream Police with them. So, to them, that's their song, it's Dream Police. Sure. And for us, I went and stayed up half the night writing a string quartet arrangement to Dream Police, giving the parts to the girls, going in the hotel room, memorizing it and rehearsing it. And then when we finally got on stage with Cheap Trick, they probably don't even know that I did that, but we all knew our parts and we all played them in sync, and that's what we did. So it's like sometimes I use that skill and it's not even known that I did, but it's
sure. But
one of those things like, I'm going to go do that. So
yeah, you take it upon yourself, and then it turns out, to be worth it, right?
Well, yeah, if we would have gotten up there and just been improvising the whole time, it wouldn't have been, as good as actually having a part to play. So,
yeah. So you, as we've been talking here a couple of times, have mentioned your Italian heritage. You have a great last name. I think it's 5 syllables, DiGregorio. I'm Italian too. I only have 3 syllables, Tavani. But tell me about that. Like, did you think much about your Italian heritage growing up?
Well, it was a huge part of my father's mother, my one grandmother's house. It was pretty much just Italian spoken. So as a young child, I understood and spoke a lot of Italian with her at her house. My mom's family had come to America sooner, so they spoke English in that grandparents' house. But one of the 2 grandparents' house I was at every weekend learning how to cook. like making sauce and meatballs and manicotti and lasagna and whatever soups, with both of my grandparents. And so I took that skill into life. I also had, although I'm an only child, I had a huge Italian family with tons and tons of aunts, uncles, and cousins. And it was like living there was great because somebody did everything. Like, oh, if this happens to you, call that uncle. If this happens, call that uncle. Or you need this, call that aunt. Or someone did everything. Like, it was just family, you're protected. There was like this huge network of people that would be there like this, no matter what you needed. And so I was very lucky to grow up that way. And I think it shaped a lot of who I am, and my grandmother's story of how she ended up getting out of Nazi occupied Italy to get to America and being the tough person she was. Like, I watched her beat the crap out of a guy in the city market in Niagara Falls when she was like 78 years old who tried to steal her purse.
Oh my God.
I got that from her, at least.
Yeah. And now, do you know where your parents' families come from in Italy?
Yeah, I visited. I actually found the home that my dad's mother lived in when the Nazi Germans soldiers took over their village during World War II in Italy. I went there, I don't know, maybe like a decade ago, and found it. And her sister was alive and her nephew. And so I got to meet like some of my extended family from Italy,
see the amazing
she grew up in, and like the things she had to deal with infant children that I couldn't even imagine. Like, she lived in a cave, like they took her house and she had to live with babies in a cave and go steal food from these soldiers to feed her kids before she came to America. Like, I couldn't imagine having to go through that. Like, this is like a generation from me, like 2 generations from me. It's crazy.
What part of Italy is that? Do you know what town?
My grandmother was from Prezza in Abruzzo, Italy. So my dad's family is from Abruzzo. My mother's family is from Perugia, which is a little further north. So that's where I get like the lighter skin and eyes and all that stuff. My dad's family looks very Italian and my mom's family doesn't. So everyone jokes and they call me French.
That's so interesting. So, I mean, and I should know this better. And I know my dad's side of the family came from a place called Ferra San Martino, which is where, if you know DiCecco pasta, that's where they make DiCecco pasta. My mom's side, though, it's somewhere in Abruzzo, but I can't remember the name. But what you just said about them living in caves, I know that my mom's family came over early 1900s. So, but I know that they were from a town where people lived in caves until like World War II. So it might be around the same place.
The reason was actually there's a great special on Netflix about the wrestler from like the 60s, Bruno Sammartino, and he tells his family story. And it made me cry watching it because it was like listening to my grandmother, who's now passed, talk about what she went through. It was the exact same thing. It was, they had their little village. They were all self-sustained, in Italy. The Nazi soldiers came in, they killed people in the village. They took their homes. They kicked them out of their homes. They migrated up to the mountains and lived in caves and hid and had to go steal things from the village when the soldiers were sleeping to eat and feed their families, and like walk 5 miles in each direction to do. And like the things that he talks about and that his family going through, it was the exact to a T story of what my grandmother went through. And it's like, I think those are important things that my kids need to understand and their kids need to understand.
Yeah, for sure. Gotta know where you came from, and those people did not have it easy. Our ancestors who came over and left Italy. It's fascinating. So this has been it's been a great conversation, Nina. Really, really interesting talking to you. Tell me, I know you've got some upcoming tour dates, so talk about where you're going to be. People can find you.
So we have some shows coming up in January. We will be on January 13th, Lake Tahoe at Harrah's. January 26th, Flint, Michigan at the Machine Shop. January 27th, Detroit, Michigan at District 142. That's all with the Femmes of Rock. So I front that show. So you'll get to see me do all the guitar solos and everything like that. In February 16th, Las Vegas at the Smith Center, I'll be playing with Brody's Symphonic Rock Show. So he'll be singing all those classic rock hits with a full symphony orchestra and I'll be featured on some electric violin stuff as well. Then in March, we're in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, March 16th at the Stadium Theater, which is one of our biggest shows of the year. It's a crazy crowd. People there are nuts, and we love it. And just announced the show in Jamestown, New York on April 27th at the Reg Lena Center, which is a cancer benefit. All of the ticket sale proceeds go to cancer research and a local hospital there for treatments and things like that. And then there's a bunch of things that I don't have contracted yet, but they're going to, so I won't talk about those yet.
Sure,
but right
sure.
now, those are the dates that are for sale.
Yeah, but you got a bunch. And Jamestown, New York, is that nearby where you're from, or?
Yeah, it's about like 90 minutes, maybe. It's not too far at all. My family actually has a summer cottage on Lake Chautauqua where we go down there. We stay at the cottage. We have a boat and everything like that. So I spent my childhood going down to Lake Chautauqua, and I get to go perform now in Jamestown, which is right there. So everyone will be going down there, and I'm sure the after party will be at my family's cottage. So
Great. And then social media, obviously you're on Twitter. I'll put that up. You're on YouTube though. Anywhere else that people should know about?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and just there's like hundreds of fake profiles of me. So make sure that if you're following one of them, it's the blue check mark verified official profile. It will also be the one with the most followers. The only one that won't verify me is TikTok for some reason. Everyone else did. Like TikTok is weird. So I have like 100 and something thousand followers on TikTok. So it's always the most followers. Just don't get scammed by these people. Like there's one guy in England who thinks he's been dating me for 6 months and sending money and has remortgaged his house because of a fake profile. And
oh my God, that's crazy.
Don't be scammed by these people on social media.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Why are they all impersonating you? What's that deal with that?
Everybody who has any traction on their pages is like, I noticed that even on Peter Frampton's page, after he shared my video and I follow his page, I saw that, his team posted, please don't be scammed by these people pretending to be me. So what they do is they're all from foreign countries. They try and say like, oh, how long have you been a fan of mine? You've been selected to have like a VIP chat with me. Please click on this link and
privately.
And then they go to like some WhatsApp link or something from another country. And so they're either selling them VIP meet and greets to my shows that don't exist, or they're pretending to be in a relationship with them, saying that like, oh, I'm not married, and that's only a farce that her management puts up. And if you send me $20,000, I'll come to whatever country and be with you, and blah, 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 like this. And people believe this stuff, and they're all broken English, spelling badly, like.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Follow the official pages and only the official page.
Yeah. Well, that's such an annoying distraction to have to deal with.
No one should have to deal with this. We should be able to just create our content, and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok should deal with this, but they don't. So
yeah. But Twitter does, or X, whatever it's called,
Found that they have if you find an impersonator account, you have to submit your driver's license, and then they will remove it within a day.
Really?
So it's actually been good since Elon Musk has taken over about removing fake profiles. Now, I don't know about everything else about the app, but that part of it, it's like the only one that I can get to remove the fake accounts.
Really?
So that's good.
That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that. I mean, there's a lot of criticism of him, obviously, and his takeover, but and so much of it centers around like misinformation and whatnot. But it sounds like they're at least trying to do things.
I don't really know how to use Twitter that well. I never have. I just started posting my videos not too long ago there.
Oh, yeah?
So I'm not really familiar with that platform, but in terms of corralling the fake profiles, it's been better. Like I said, TikTok's the worst. There's probably there's hundreds of fake profiles of me on TikTok, and they do absolutely nothing about those. Even if you report them a million times, they do nothing. So be careful out there, everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Well, all right. This was so great. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me, and it's been super interesting, and just love the work you're doing. Love the music. It's so good. I could listen to it, so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And definitely we got to figure out how to get you playing the national anthem at a Bills game, or whoever. I guess any game, right? Doesn't have to be the Bills.
Preferably at Highmark though, in my town, so.
Yeah, that would make the most sense since you're a fan and so forth. But this has been great. So thanks again for coming on. It was great talking to you.
Thanks. Nice to meet you.